Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone tuning in from all over the world. For those watching the recording on YouTube later, we are so glad to have you as well to support and hype up Empowering Med's second event, Overcoming Obstacles, an interview and Q&A session with Samantha Lujan. I'm your co-host Sophia.
And I am Ria. We're super glad to be here and have the chance to interview such a talented, determined young woman who, against all odds, went into medical school and conquered the challenges thrown at her. But before we start, I will briefly introduce our guest and a little about her background.
Samantha Lujan is a third-year medical student at Foster School of Medicine in Texas. She received her bachelor degree in chemistry from the University of Texas of the Permian Basin in 2015, and after about a year of working to gain clinical experience as an ED scribe and shadowing medical residents and attendees, she applied to medical school. She is what you would call a non-traditional student, and her path to medical school is not typical by any means. And the obstacles she has had to overcome make for a great story to tell when it comes to med school interviewing and sharing the lessons she's learned along the way. Being a proud Chicana, it is important to her that she represents and advocates for this unique patient population. By all standards, Samantha has surpassed all the qualities a medical student should possess, from empathy to passion, and we are honored to have her as our guest here today to share her story, her experience, and ultimately her views on the ups and downs of her journey. Welcome, Samantha.
Hi, guys.
Before we start, however, I'd like to remind everyone to keep your microphone muted throughout the interview. We also ask that if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will address your inquiry or concern as soon as possible. There will be a live quiz after the session where the grading scale is already provided for you in the event details sent out beforehand. All right, with that out of the way, let's dive straight into today's interview. My first question to you is, why did you decide to pursue medicine?
Okay. So why did I decide to pursue medicine? So that's a really good question, because there's no one single answer to it. I think it's funny because I remember whenever I was like writing my med school application, at least my essays, and I was just freaking out about that one question. They're like, why did you pursue medicine? Because it's a question that you'll see on your medical school applications. So I was just freaking out about it. I was like, what am I going to write? I didn't have this one singular moment or reason that when I realized, oh, this is going to be it. It's going to be medicine. That always has been and will be. So I went to my advisor, my pre-med advisor at the time, and I was just asking him, I was like, I don't have this reason. And he just kind of like scoped at me and he's just like laughing. He's like, when has that ever been the case for anybody? He's like, yeah, there's some people who will have like this one singular moment, but for a lot of people, it's this gradual realization. And I think that's how it was for me, because I didn't have one main reason why I decided to like actually pursue medicine. I had many. I had a lot of reasons. So I just did a lot of reflection, and I kind of realized that I had a lot of my childhood experiences. They were kind of somewhat guiding me to want to better the health of a patient or an individual. It didn't even have to be a patient at the time. I think I was just wanting to better the health of people and those that are around them, because I knew what it felt like to actually lose a loved one far too early to preventable health problems, you know? And I recall, like, you know, how helpless I felt whenever my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so there's just, and how helpless the family felt too. And just how lost they felt with no information and things like that. And then, you know, I also kind of knew how it felt to want to better the quality of life of somebody who was suffering from chronic disease like my grandma was. So I kind of had all these intrinsic reasons and motivations that were already there since I was a little girl. And then I had this love for science. I always been a science geek and a science nerd, and even as a kid. So, and I absolutely fell in love with chemistry once I started going to school and trying to, like, you know, pursue a bachelor's degree. So I fell in love with chemistry, and I kind of wanted to blend those. I wanted to use, you know, chemistry, and I wanted to use I wanted to find a way to, interact and to have these engaging conversations with individuals and figure out what was going on, what was at the root of their problem, to kind of help them the best that I could. So that's kind of how everything kind of pointed to. Everything was pointing to medicine. It's just that I didn't have a name to put to it. And if I'm going to say like one reason I think I finally decided to like pursue medicine was because it was at a community college and I was taking biology. I was taking basic biology. I was taking basic biology and I already had all these ideas in my mind about what I wanted to do, right? And my Mr. Stacy, I remember his name, Clovis Stacy, so long ago, but I still remember his name. My biology professor was going around asking everybody, well, what are they going to do? What's your plan? What's it going to be? And he got to me and I didn't have any like main plan. But he asked me to describe it to him. And I gave him all the reasons I just listed to you guys right now. And he's like, well, it looks like you want to go into medicine. And that was the first time I had ever heard it. So I was like, okay, maybe we should start trying that.
That's great. You mentioned helping people with chronic diseases. So does your specialty right now reflect that?
So the right now in third year, we have our clinical rotations, and I haven't gotten a chance to rotate in internal medicine, which is where I would see a lot of chronic disease, especially diabetes. Diabetes is definitely going to be a big thing for us in internal medicine, how to manage it. It's a monster to manage. There's so many medications. There are so many downstream effects. It's obviously associated with cardiovascular disease and problems like that. So it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's also going to compound and cause a lot of other chronic issues. So I haven't gotten a chance to really rotate in that. I did a shadow in internal medicine. And I loved it. So I think what I'm thinking right now is I want to still do internal medicine, which would be managing, a lot of these chronic diseases. But I would also like to kind of, I guess you would say, up the ante and want to do a little bit more of critical care, because I found that I absolutely love the lungs. I love pulmonology. I love nephrology. And those guys go really hand in hand with each other. So I really kind of want to pursue a little bit more in critical care as well.
So what career path did you initially choose at first?
So initially, because remember, I just said that my grandma had diabetes, and she'd been suffering with type 2 diabetes for a very long time, and she managed it poorly. I had initially wanted to do a dietitian. I initially wanted to look into going into or becoming a registered dietitian, because I figured, well, I can help her with that. I can help a lot of people who have diabetes to manage their disease with food. I mean, and that's good, because you want to first initially start with lifestyle changes and things like that, right, and diet. And so that's where I started. But then with the support of a lot of my mentors and professors there, as I kind of went further and further in my undergraduate, they're just like, I think you want to do more than just this. And they were right. I really wanted to kind of pursue a little bit more.
Wow, thank you. I see that's definitely inspiring. And that brings me to my next question. What was it like when you realized that that being a dietitian just wasn't for you? Was it a difficult decision to make?
So when it comes to that, I don't think it really was a very difficult decision to make to kind of branch out into medicine. I think it was more difficult to believe that I could go into medicine. So I think a lot of times, well, I think for me, a lot of times, as I kind of like reflect on everything that has happened, like in the last how many years is that? 5, 6 years? Oh my gosh, 6 years. I've always thought that, just because of my background, because no one was a college graduate, I didn't really have any direction. No one there wasn't very many people to kind of help me move forward and kind of think this is something that I could grasp. This was something that I could achieve. It was really hard to see yourself in that position. It was really hard to see myself as a doctor. So it wasn't hard to make the decision. It was hard to believe that it could happen. So that was kind of like the biggest thing. Because once I thought, oh, wow, medicine sounds great. I really, really think I want to go into medicine. The decision wasn't difficult at all.
So, are there absolutely no regrets in switching to medicine regarding how you see yourself and how you have combated it?
No, I have no regrets. It has been one heck of a ride. It really has. It's exhausting at times. It's very I mean, it's trying. It's definitely trying on a lot of things. Your emotions, your relationships, things like that. But I have no regrets. I wouldn't have done anything differently. Um, it's I've learned a lot along the way. And I think a lot of the things, or a lot of the reasons why I kind of am who I am, is because of how I've chosen to kind of face those difficulties. So,
So, how has medical school differed from your previous expectations?
um, I don't think it has differed a lot. I think we're told, like, whenever, as we're pre-meds, we're told that there's going to be a lot of material. It's going to be very hard. Um, I think the one thing that I have to add to that is I don't think the material is very hard. It is just the volume of material that they give you. Everything that you've probably done in no, not one semester, let's go with 1 year of undergrad, you're going to probably do in 5 weeks in medical school. So I guess, like, for example, we have over here at Paulo Foster's, we have organ system units. And our first unit that we start with in medical school is an introduction to health and disease. And it's 5 weeks. It's 5 weeks long. And that's literally everything that you've done within your 4 years of undergraduate. Everything from immunology to microbiology to physiology to anatomy. Well, at least the beginning of anatomy, because as you go through your organ systems, you're going to recap on all those specific focuses in anatomy. But that's all in 5 weeks, and you have to be sure to get it down to a level of detail that you will be able to at least answer any question that they're going to throw at you. So it's really the volume. The volume has been the biggest thing that I think shocks anybody coming into medical school, because they're just throwing it at you. And it's expected that you will absorb as much as you possibly can.
So, now we'll be going over questions that are more directly related to your experience in medical school. The first one I have for you is, what has been your favorite class or topic so far?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good one. So I do love immunology. I love all the cascades, since I came from a chemistry background, and there was a lot of biochemistry involved in that. I love immunology. All of the cascades and all of, like, the concentrations of specific cytokines that will induce in the body certain, like, phenotypes to manifest. I mean, that's all just miraculous and amazing. So immunology is one of them. And then again, pulmonology, because pulmonology, we don't have a lot of pulmonologists currently right now, but given the opportunity, I wish a lot of people would go into pulmonology, because the mechanics of the lungs is just beautiful to watch. And so I would say immunology, pulmonology, and nephrology, because that's all chemistry as well.
So, according to some people, actually, a lot of medical students, the coursework for medical school isn't easy. So, what are some methods you find helpful to retain the information that you learn in class?
So, like I said before, it's a lot of volume, right? Like, all that material is there. You have to be able to read through it in a reasonable amount of time, and then you have to find a way to commit it to memory, right? So for me, what I found, and I don't have like conventional ways of doing this, because a lot of medical students, like my friends and classmates, they love using Anki, which I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with that. Almost all medical students are familiar with Anki, and I'm pretty sure pre-meds are. But coming into medical school, that was the first time I had learned of Anki. So Anki is a huge, it's a huge, flashcard base. You can also download like pretty much everybody's flashcard decks from their Anki website, or from a Reddit or some place like that, where like pre-meds kind of congregate and just post their decks there. So a lot of people use that, and Anki is really nice for space repetition, which is very important in medical school. You want to be sure that as you go through all of these units in medical school, you are going back and you're reviewing those units, because of course 2 months later you're probably going to forget everything that you learned in the first month, because you're trying to cram all this other volume into it on the gastrointestinal system. So now you've forgotten everything from the complement cascade that was in the intro to health and disease. So you got to keep going back to it, and that's what Anki is really helpful for. It helps you guys to go ahead and space it out for you. You don't have to space it out yourself. So that'll space it out for you, right? So flashcards, very good. When I'm first learning the material, I find that it's good for me to go through the PowerPoint, or if you guys are if you guys don't get PowerPoints, like the outlines that they have, I like to go through the outlines, and I like to write things in my own words. I was able to pull one for you guys. Like I said, I don't have a conventional way of doing it, but so I'll do my outline and then I'll start talking through my way. So I actually have this guy, and this is from nephrology. So what I end up doing is I end up starting with one page, and then I start placing them together, and they each have arrows pointing to something that induced me to think, oh, okay, that's talking about UTIs. And if I'm talking about UTIs, well, then what else do I want to know about UTIs? I want to know about micturition and the process of urination and how you void and things like that. And then I just kind of start going down that. And this comes in real handy later. After I first initially do this, I can go ahead and I can just tape it up, and I can teach it back to myself. So that's when I start going through it, and I start talking about the points and trying to wrap everything up into a very succinct, outline. So that's like a teach back method, and that's why I use that. And that generally gets me through a whole week. That's a whole week of material.
That's amazing. And that brings us to the next question. What are some tips you have for students going into medical school relating to balancing their work and free time?
So for that, I think it's really, really important that you kind of sit down and you think about how you manage your time and what would be the best way for you to optimize that, right? So I know a lot of people like to use hour by hour timetables. I think it's really, really important to schedule out your time. That was the only way that I was able to get through my undergraduate, because I also worked full-time and then part-time. So that way I could go ahead and pay for my undergraduate. So you have to, at that time, I had to plan out like everything. I had to plan it out hour by hour, because I had to work, and then I had to go to school, like the actual undergraduate classes, and then I had to go back home and study to be able to prepare for those classes. So sometimes that helps. Reflect on it and be honest with yourself. Try it for a couple of days, at least a week. It's always really important to try it for at least a week, because that was my cutoff time whenever I was trying different study schedules in medical school. I would at least use it for a week. If it looked like it was working, then I'd continue for 2 weeks and then continue on from there. So schedule it out. Be honest with yourself if you're sticking to it. Some people like to use checklists, which is what I use now. I use checklists. I think they're really helpful. I also very satisfying to check off something that you get done in the day. it doesn't really matter the time I get done because I like to jump back and forth between things during the day, but I at least schedule a time frame like 8 to 5, where that's the time that I will be doing this stuff. So that's very, very helpful. So schedule, and then try it out. It doesn't work for a week. Don't feel bad about it. Try something different. Checklists, block scheduling, something like that.
Schedules can sometimes be a bit monotonous, so how do you prevent burnout and fatigue?
Yeah, so that's why I ended up switching to checklists, because I got so burned out with the details of the hour by hour, and then you feel horrible about not being able to stick to that hour by hour, right? So now you feel like you're failing at that, and so it just compounds on itself, and then you end up just completely throwing that schedule out the window, and now that's all gone. Like the entire week is gone. So the way that I managed that was by the checklist. The checklist has been like the best thing for me. And then just kind of understanding that you're going to need a little bit of time. If you're tired that day, like when I was on my schedule for surgery, whenever I was on my rotation for surgery, I was just tired day in, day out. I was so tired. And I had scheduled for time to do questions, because we do UWorld questions in third year. And I just wasn't able to get to them. And I think it's just one of those things where you have to be willing to give yourself a little bit of leeway on that. And you want to be sure that you take those and you kind of try to move them over to the next week. And I know that can also pile up too. But you take it week by week. You take it week by week. And you try to make sure that you don't put too much on your plate at that point. But you also do need rest. So
Speaking of work-life balance, do you find medical school particularly stressful? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the workload and stress that comes with it?
So I think I would rate the workload about like a 7 or an 8. And the stress with that workload is about a 7 or an 8. I think the stress comes more from being afraid that you're going to fail than the actual material itself or the workload. So when I'm thinking about that, I'm just like, man, the workload can be more bothersome than stressful, especially in third year. In third year, all you want to do is study for step 2, which is what we're all doing right now, is trying to find a time to study for step 2. But during third year, your clinical rotations, medicine is an apprenticeship. You have to be willing to get in there and, be hands-on and learn. And that takes up pretty much all your day. So the stress of that workload is really from the fact that I'm not being able to study as much for other things. So the workload itself, is what's like kind of stressful there. And it's not because it's hard to do. It's just because it takes away from that time for you to actually do your questions and do what you want to do. If I want to focus on critical care and pulmonology, it's really hard to be involved in surgery or be fully involved in surgery when that's all you can think about on the side. So
What are some extracurricular activities you were involved in before med school that you're still pursuing now?
So extracurricular activities, I didn't really have a chance to do a lot of those. That was kind of like the one thing that was a little lacking on my my medical school application, because if I wasn't at school or if I wasn't at the university, in classes, or if I wasn't at home studying, then I was at work because I did work. But one thing that I remember doing a lot of as a kid, and I kind of pulled it into into my extracurriculars, was crocheting. And so I still crochet. And what I was looking for is just kind of trying to think outside the box. And I ended up finding a lot of communities that would knit or crochet these prosthetic breast forms for women. So that was one of the ways I was able to kind of like, get involved in some extracurricular activities before med school. And I still do that. It's just that as of right now, all I do is I make them as stock and you can send them off.
So, what are some additional interests that you have outside of studying?
So I'm a mad crafter. So I love to crochet. I love to crochet. I love to paint. I embroider, and all of those seem to translate really well into into suturing in the OR. So that's been really great. And then I also love to play video games too. So, and I love music too. I love music as well.
Would you say test scores are a particularly key factor in determining whether or not you thrive in med school?
So this might be unpopular opinion, but I don't think that they do. So I don't think that they're key in determining whether you're going to thrive in medical school, because medicine is when you're actually with a patient, medicine is not just the science. It's not just being able to answer a b c d e question. I mean, no one patient is textbook. um, Very, very, very seldom are you going to get a patient who is textbook. um, so if you can answer a question, I mean, that's great. And if you can get a great score, I think scores show that we're competent, but I don't think that they're going to determine whether or not you're going to thrive in medical school, because there are different aspects of medicine that a lot of people who don't do well in on these standardized tests, that they just like thrive in, like patient encounters. I know a couple of people, myself included. I'm not a high scorer, but I think we do really great in patient encounters. We do a great job of approaching the patient in a way that is, I don't think, as conventional as a question would be. So we think about the broad picture and then we start pulling in the details. Um, and I think that helps a lot when it comes to determining differentials, because again, no patient is going to be textbook. Um, and the differentials are very important. So it ends up helping us a lot with differentials, is just having this broad, big picture. Um, and then again, like I said, like I think a lot of the people that I know that didn't get like that great of a score are just fantastic talking to patients and eliciting that information from them that actually gets us the diagnosis. So I think it shows that you are competent in a certain area, and that's great. And we all need that. I mean, that's why we have standardized tests, and that's why we have the standardized tests here, from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, which shows that we are competent in those particular areas. But I don't think that they're going to show whether or not you're going to do great in medical school, or if you're going to just thrive as a physician. I think those are going to be determinant on like how much you decide to put into medical school itself.
Can you tell us what a day in your life looks like?
Yeah. Okay. So we can go with the really busy one, which was the surgery rotation. And that one was fun. So surgery rotation, the way that starts out, and that's the block that I'm on. I'm on surgery, pediatrics, and obstetrics. There's a lot of surgery in it, because obstetrics and gynecology also has their own division of surgery. So what we do is we get up at like 3:45 in the morning, because at that point I'm grabbing something as far as like coffee, maybe like some oatmeal, and I'm pre-charting. So I have to pre-chart on my patients. What I do is I just pull up their charts. I'm looking to see who came in at the time. If it's surgery, I'm looking to see who came in overnight. Um, and I'm picking a couple of patients to go ahead and round on. I'm communicating with my other students that are on the same rotation as me, so that way we all are distributing the patients evenly. And so I go ahead and I pre-chart, look at their chart. I'm at the hospital at least by 4:45, so that way I can go in and unfortunately wake my patient up at 5 o'clock in the morning, so that way I can see if there was any overnight events, go ahead and check their labs, and then perform a quick physical exam. Just make sure if they had surgery before or the day before, if their incisions are doing well, things like that. So we'll go ahead and we'll stop pre-rounding. We'll meet our attendees and our senior residents, and we'll go ahead and we'll round with them. So we do a pre-round and then we do a round. And so we'll round with them. We're going to go through all of the patients now. And when it's time to see the patient that we saw, we give them a rapid fire about how our patient was doing, what we saw on physical exam, and also what our assessment and our plan is for this patient. So we'll go through that whole thing. And then after everybody's seen and we have a good idea, if it was your turn to write notes, you're going to go ahead and you're going to write notes. If the residents don't want you to write notes, then you're good. So now we're going to go, since we're on surgery, we're going to go over to the OR board and we're going to split up all the surgeries, because there are surgeries from 7 a.m. all the way to 5. So we go and we split up all the surgeries. If you are one of the first, which I love to be one of the firsts because they're always on time. If you're a 7 a.m. surgery, you are always on time. So if you are on the first surgery, you're going to run over and you're going to be sure to scrub in real quick because those guys are going to be ready to go. So you'll go through all of your surgeries and you'll probably be out by like 5. You'll probably be done by 5:30 if you're lucky. And then we go back around and we're going to check the patients again. Any patients that got surgery that day and any patients that were following up and weren't discharged. So we'll go see those guys, see how they're doing, say hello again, make sure they're doing good. And then we're going to sign off to the night team. And so that's the end of your normal rotation day. Now we still have to go back home. So at 5:30, I'm headed back home. If it's a good day, then I might be able to do a little workout with my husband online. So we might be able to. If I'm really tired, then I just want to get something to eat. Because most of the time, I probably didn't eat from breakfast until then. Because those surgeries can go on a long time. And if you're lucky, then you can go and you can get lunch in between surgeries. But I'll go make something to eat and then go ahead and try to do some kind of studying because I still have to get those questions in. And I try to go to bed at 10. And then we're going to get right back up at 3:45 and do that over again. But that's only for surgery. That's only for surgery.
What about in a situation where an emergent surgical patient comes in? Do you get called in again?
If you are on trauma nights, so there is a time when we are there for the night, and those are trauma nights, and those have been very exciting. So we are a level 1 trauma center. So all of those, get shuttled to us. All level 1s get shuttled to us, and we'll get, if you are on surgery and trauma nights, we'll get the call letting us know, so that way everybody can run to the trauma bay to go ahead and get ready for a patient. So during trauma nights, we do, but any other time, if we're not on trauma nights, we don't get called in like that. Now we do have, since it's OB-GYN rotation as well is kind of pushed into there. We have what we call a continuity patient. And so that is a pregnant patient that's about like 32 weeks, maybe 34. And you introduce yourself and you try to see if they will allow you to go ahead and follow them through their pregnancy. So I had a great continuity patient. She was great. And I was able to follow her through her entire pregnancy. And now all I have to do is follow her up for her postpartum appointment, which I will be conducting. So that's kind of the whole thing is you go from her prenatal care and all of her OB follow-ups all the way through triage and labor and delivery, and then into postpartum care. So the whole thing is to make sure it's like kind of this continuity of care, so you can kind of see how it is. And those days we are on call. It doesn't matter when or if you had just gotten off of something. If she's going into labor, you're running over to participate in the labor or help in the delivery.
That sounds quite exciting.
It was.
What is one memorable experience you have in med school that sticks out to you?
Ooh, that's a good one too. because there's so many of them. There's so many of them. I think my favorite has been, or there've been the tiny ones, the small ones. Like whenever I currently right now in rotations, they're the little things whenever I'm maybe doing a patient encounter, and you remember little things about certain syndromes that you never think that you'll see until you're actually in clinic. And the resident that you're with will go out with you and say, "That's a good catch." And you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I did well. He said he said that was a good catch." So, I mean, the situation I'm talking about here is the fact that I was doing a physical exam on a 14-year-old, and they had some complaints of a little bit of I don't want to say mass is what they were calling it, but well, they were calling it a kind of a mass. Had a little bit of a mass on his sternum. It was just a little strange, is what they said. They're like, "It's strange. I don't really understand what's going on there." And then he had like a history of a little bit of some cardiac issues, but we didn't really know. There was no information available at the time on that. And so I went in and I was doing the physical exam. And as I was doing the physical exam, you start to notice certain things, like he's there for a well visit. He's very tall. He's very lanky. He has long fingers. And then when I'm inspecting and listening to the heart and the lungs and inspecting the chest, I see that it's a little, excavated. So it's a little pushed in here. So it's interesting because then afterwards the resident comes in, and in my mind, I'm thinking, this is very Marfan habitus. I need to start thinking of certain things that might be a problem for him. And he complains of shortness of breath and things like that. And there's something going on here. And so the resident comes in and he starts to do his own physical exam. And while he's talking to the mother as well, I'm asking him to continue doing the physical exam, like with little things. Like there's like some hyperextensibility with Ehlers-Danlos, which is one of the syndromes that is on the differentials for that, as well as like with Marfan syndrome. So I'm getting him to do these little things that the resident didn't get him to do. And as we're walking out, the resident's like, "Can you tell me why you were doing that?" And I gave him the whole spiel of what it was, and he's just like, "That is a really good catch. Like, I wouldn't have thought of that." So it's interesting to see everything that you've learned. You're putting it together in your head, and a senior resident is telling you, "Very good catch. I did not think about that." And it's great to see everybody kind of working together to kind of figure these things out. But that's like my most memorable.
Yes, it's always nice to be complimented by someone senior to you.
I know. I was just like, "Oh my gosh, really?"
Yeah, that's great.
So how has being a non-traditional student benefited or disadvantaged you in your application process to medical school?
I don't think that it has actually disadvantaged me in very many ways. I think it's helped a lot more than any kind of disadvantage. And reasons why. So if I was to say that there would be some cons to it, the cons would be the fact that I don't get to do as many extracurricular activities, obviously, as some other people do, because most of the time I was working. If I wasn't working, I was at school, and that's pretty much was my life for a certain point. Just work, school, work, school. So I didn't get to do very much extracurriculars. I didn't get to participate in a lot of programs for med students and things like that. So these just weren't things that I was able to do that I know would have helped in the medical application process. Also, I didn't get a chance to really do my clinical experience or gain clinical experience or do any kind of shadowing until after I had graduated and I had at least applied to medical school once. And then I realized how anemic my application was in that area. So that would be the one thing that I would say would be a disadvantage. But on the other side of it, I have a lot of life experience. So I have a lot of life experience to speak of. I have a lot of instances where I was able to at least talk to interviewers about certain things I don't think other people would have been able to, actually like speak on or engage in, like carrying two jobs at the same time and still, trying to find a way for us to, or still trying to find ways to go to school and just trying to figure out those kinds of things. Trying to think of it's a little difficult because I don't think it's a disadvantage at all because you have a longer story to tell instead of just school and undergraduate and that's it. You have and in that story you have a lot of points that can be made as to like your perseverance and your determination and things like that. So I think it's really benefited me more than anything else. But yeah.
So like kind of like the life experience is kind of
Yeah.
that's interesting. What are some obstacles? What are some of the obstacles you've had to overcome as a first gen and non-traditional med student, and how did you overcome those challenges?
So that was like one of the main reasons why it took me a little bit longer to complete my undergraduate degree and things like that. It's just because I didn't really have much direction. I didn't have very many people to kind of tell me what was to come or what to expect. And with somebody maybe who, like being a first generation, if I had somebody previously, a generation before me, be able to tell me, okay, this is what you do to be able to get your undergraduate. This is what you do to be able to, pursue a higher level after undergraduate. I didn't really have any idea about how all of that worked. And I didn't really understand what a pre-med advisor was. I didn't really know of any of that. So that was the biggest challenge, was really trying to find the right resources and finding resources for me to be able to kind of help me navigate everything and be able to kind of like pave out my own path to medicine. So that was the hardest thing I've had to do. But once you find them, they're there, and some of like the best support system and the best advisors I've had have been from these smaller areas, like my community college with Mr. Stacy and all of the professors there. They were very supportive once once I had been vocal about the fact that I was really wanting to pursue something in medicine, and then they kind of branched out to the university right next to us, and they were just like, well, go talk to this person. And the pre-med advisor there was kind of helping me navigate too. And then I also had a lot of friends once I started going to university, taking classes there, that they kind of had this little group of pre-meds, and they kind of band around, and they were really helpful in understanding, well, you need to start getting these kinds of resources together so that way you can prepare for the MCAT. Because I didn't even know what an MCAT was. So I think almost 3 years into my undergraduate, I still didn't know what an MCAT was. I was just like, yeah, I'm considering applying to medical school. And they're like, have you taken the MCAT? I was like, what's that? They were just like, wait, what? So they started helping me kind of like, gather together my resources and figure out what I needed to do in that sense. Like I needed to do this for my application. I needed to take the MCAT. I needed to get this score to take the MCAT or to pass the MCAT, things like that.
So, what are some lessons that you obtained from your journey through, going to med school?
Ooh. Those are, I think the biggest one has been to not be afraid of failure. That is like the biggest thing that I've learned along this entire pathway to like medicine. And that's because sometimes during biochemistry, I loved biochemistry, but a lot of times I would just fail some quizzes just horribly. And it would really hurt me. I'd be like, this is going to be the one reason why I don't make it to medical school. I'm like, I guess I don't have what it takes. I guess I'm not cut out for it. And I think if I had not been so afraid of just failing one little quiz and things like that, then I might have been able to reflect a little bit more on it and be like, okay. I failed this. Why did I fail it? Not just I failed it, I'm not cut out for things. So that's one of the biggest things that I've learned along this path, along my particular path, is I just should not be afraid of failure. I should not give it the power to tell me that I'm not cut out for certain things. It's just a way for me to stop and reevaluate and just come back better. So I think that's one of the biggest things that or the biggest lessons that I've learned along the way, at least all the way through, and still learning, still using that.
What advice do you have? Yeah, I'm sorry. What advice do you have for anyone pursuing a lifelong dream and feeling discouraged because of their age?
Oh yeah, I get age is just a number. Age is just a number. I think if you're going to, that was actually one of the questions that I got in a medical school interview. I can't remember where it was, but it was something similar to that extent. Like they were just asking, well, if you don't get in this time, what are you going to do now? I was like, well, I'm going to apply next year. They're like, well, what about that? If you don't get in next year, well, then I'm going to apply the year after that. And they're just like, but progressively, you're getting older and older and older. I'm like, if this is the choice that I've made, if this is the career that I want, if this is the lifestyle that I want, it's not necessarily a career so much as the lifestyle that I want to live, then I don't think it matters at what age that I'm getting all of this done, or at what age that I'm going to be a doctor. It's the fact that I will be able to be a doctor. I will have the privilege to work with people, to help them, to guide them, to treat them. And I don't think it matters what age I will be at that time. So it's one of those. I'm not even the oldest in my class right now. I actually have a lot of people that are second careers, as they say, and they're back in and they're in medical school, and they're fantastic students and they're fantastic people. And it's just because they've had this whole wealth of knowledge from their previous career and their previous their previous life before they got here to medicine, right? And they're fantastic students, and they're going to be great doctors, but they're older than me. So it's just a number.
What about some advice you might have for aspiring pre-med students?
So for aspiring pre-med students, so I think for any pre-med student, I would say gather a support system. You're going to need a support system because this is not an easy path. There will be heartbreak. There will be hardships. You might not pass the MCAT the first time, and if you do, that's great. You might not get the score you want, but that's okay. Find a good support system. A support system that is going to back you and help you kind of realize, like you realize things, or realize that you can make it, basically. That's kind of what I needed, and I did get a great support system. I always had my husband. He was always backing me up. I think when I got a bad grade, he would tell me that the score doesn't define me, and it's true. The score doesn't define you as a student, as a future physician, things like that. And the admissions committees for medical schools also know that. They do a holistic review of you, and a lot of schools, the second time when I actually put a very well-rounded application that's reflective of me, I got a lot of interviews. And I got a lot of interviews for somebody who didn't have the greatest of a score, but they themselves, as an admissions committee, saw something more that maybe I wasn't seeing. So that, I think, get yourself a really good support system. That's always really good. Don't give up on it. It's going to be hard. It's not hard for anybody. If it was hard, everybody would do it. It's going to be hard, but just keep pushing forward, and collaborate with one another. That is like the biggest thing that I can say too. You don't want to foster this environment of competition, because all it's going to do is bring out the worst in people. you want to collaborate together, because that's what you're going to do whenever you're actually in clinic with colleagues. You're going to collaborate. It's not about who knows the more. It's not about who has the highest score. It's about what you can bring to the table. And everybody can bring something great to the table, at least in the medical field. So collaborate, find your support system, and just keep pushing forward and take it day by day.
So, finally, what did you not know before going to medicine that you wish you knew?
I wish I had known how deep imposter syndrome goes, and how much it can affect your first year of medical school. I think I wasn't the only one who felt like this too. We got a couple of people who, a couple of my friends in medical school. We all kind of eventually came to the realization, and kind of like would talk about the fact that we're like, oh my gosh, there's all these great students here, and like, what am I doing here? Why did they give me a spot here? I don't even belong. Look at how fantastic all these people are. I wish somebody had told me how detrimental that can be to, you starting out medical school, you putting your best foot forward, and being able to just get through that first semester. So as you guys progress forward, if you're going into your undergraduate and things like that, and the first semester doesn't come out that great, and you don't think you belong, understand that that is not the case. A lot of people feel this way. You are not alone in feeling like you just don't belong. And that goes double for medical school. As you start medical school and things like that, you're going to feel like you don't belong. You're going to get that imposter syndrome and feel like there's no reason as to why I deserve to be here, but you do. So I wish I had known that beforehand, and I wish I had known ways to combat it. And one of the biggest ways to combat it is to recognize it, to recognize when you're being irrational about that, and to recognize kind of like when other people are feeling the same way as you. Like, a lot of people will show that, oh no, I'm okay. I belong here. A lot of people will just kind of smile and go about their day, but deep down, a lot of people are feeling as though they are like inadequate when it comes to being in medical school. So don't feel like that. Recognize it and combat it with being kind to yourself, and understanding that, this was a lot of hard work getting to where you're at today. And you shouldn't sleep on that. You shouldn't disregard all the hard work that you've done.
So that was a very enlightening and fun session. I'm sure I can speak for everyone, whether they are here with us on live today or tuning in afterwards or watching the recording, which we'll be posting on YouTube later, that you've been amazing and we've all learned a lot from you. So again, thank you for being here and sharing your experience with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Right now, we will be transitioning to the Q&A session from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I'll be calling on you in a bit. If you'd like to type your questions in the chat, feel free to do so as well, and I'll read any questions in the chat and have Samantha answer them. But meanwhile, here are a few questions and comments we received through the RSVP form. Unfortunately, some people weren't able to attend the event live today, but they've written down their questions they have for you. So here's the first one from Arani. Arani says, what do you feel is the largest struggle of adapting to medical school, both in the traditional and non-traditional pathway?
I think the biggest thing is the time management. That's going to be the hardest thing to adapt to, because depending on whether or not a lot of people, depending on whether or not somebody is it depends on how quickly you can get through like the material. This is kind of where I was thinking. Like, depending on whether or not you can get through the material quickly, if it takes you a while to read it like I do. It took me a while to read the material, get through the material quickly. That has been the biggest thing to adjust to, because after a while, after a while, I couldn't take notes anymore. I had to just get through the material, repeat getting through the material, reading it again, not really focusing too much on taking my outline. So as I kept going through medical school, that was the biggest challenge, or the biggest thing that I had to adapt to, is fast, getting through it, retaining it, getting through it, retaining it, going back again, because you want a repeat exposure of your material, so that way eventually it just sticks to it sticks in the mind. But that's what I would say would be like the biggest challenge in adapting is the time management, making sure that you get through the material quickly, and just forcing yourself through it, forcing you to make changes to be able to get yourself through it.
So, do you think your age has greatly impacted your experience in medical school, or has it had little influence? Also, do you have any advice on maintaining motivation and ambition? From Sabrina.
Oh, okay. So I don't I think if anything, my age, I'm a little bit, since I'm like a little bit more traditional, a little bit older, I tend to not go out very much. So maybe that's impacted me a little bit there. I don't really go out too much with like my other friends or students and things like that. I'm a homebody. So if anything, it kind of helps me study a little bit more, but it also helps me unwind a little bit more. I don't have to worry about like, meeting everybody for certain like for certain group activities and things like that, as far as like going to a movie or going out to have drinks or things like that. Um I think I'm a little bit more, because we also have very, very young people in medical school, right? So I think I'm a little bit more mature on the way that I view patients, and I also am a little bit more um, I'm a little bit more wise to how certain people present themselves, because I've had a lot more interactions with people, adults, elderly, things like that. I've had a lot more interactions, and I think I can actually get a better idea about how people, whether people are hiding something, whether they are truthful in the things that they say. So that just comes with life experience, though, and a lot of interaction with other people. Um, and then to stay motivated and to like um, kind of keep that flame lit. I think that's going to come with, as you kind of go through medical school. Eventually, you're probably going to feel a little bit of burnout. You're going to get tired. It's very tiring. There's a lot to do in medical school. There's a lot of expectations. So to stay motivated, I would say that for me, it's the best thing that has kind of helped me with that is patient interaction. So volunteer at whenever you're in medical school. Most likely you're going to have a clinic that is available for med students, third year, fourth years, and some residents and attendees and things like that. There's probably going to be maybe a free clinic somewhere, and I would say volunteer there, so that way you can go ahead and you can get that patient interaction and get that feel for how it's going to be whenever you actually get through your third and your fourth year and you've graduated and you now have your MD and you're moving on to residency. I think in the thick of it, it gets really hard to see what that endpoint's going to look like or what it's going to feel like. But if you kind of start getting into more patient interactions, I think you'll be able to at least see it every once in a while, to where it's going to at least keep everything there. It's going to keep that passion there. It won't get fizzled out by all of the work and all of the requirements that you need to have done to be able to obtain that MD.
And so that concludes the comments and questions we've received from the forum. For the audience who are here with us today, feel free to raise your hands and ask any questions you have, or drop those in the chat.
Okay, so we have the first one from Shinyi. Would you say a mentorship is particularly important for a career in medicine? How would you advise high school students or undergrads or med students to seek mentorship while they are still in school?
I think so whenever I was putting together my medical school application, a lot of times the information, or at least the interviewers, would ask me about what was going on during undergraduate. A lot of times there wasn't a lot of information that was elicited from me from high school. I think that's a really great way for you to kind of get an idea for how medicine really works, instead of using, like Grey's Anatomy or what is the other one currently right now? I don't know. I don't watch any of the medical.
Good
There,
doctor.
okay, there you go. The doctor. There you go. So maybe that one. That way, I mean, you're not pulling the experience of being a doctor who's going to be from these kinds of, like romanticized versions of it, right? So I think it's a really good idea to get into a mentorship if you want to really get a feel for what medicine is going to be like before you start pursuing a pre-med degree, which is generally, biology or chemistry, or specifically if you do pre-med, it's normally around biology and chemistry. So if that's what you would like, I think that would really help kind of like, aim you or point you in the right direction and give you a very good idea as to what medicine really is. But I don't think that it's something that is very strongly weighed whenever you actually start doing your medical school applications and your interviews and things like that, because they really want to know what you were doing during undergrad. High school is like a plus, I think what it'll do is it'll help you write your essays and kind of convey why you were thinking about going into medicine from like an early age or high school. But if it's not something that you absolutely can do, or if it's like really difficult for you to do and it's going to cut into you actually studying and, what's it called, passing high school, well and stuff and being okay, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. But I mean, to each their own, however you guys want to do that.
So what made you choose medical school over maybe another healthcare career like nursing, PA school, dental school, or something like that?
So I don't like teeth. I don't like teeth because I couldn't do dental. I actually love chemistry, so pharmacy would have been a choice too, right? But I've seen in pharmacies, we don't have a lot of patient interaction, and that's one of the things that I really wanted is patient interaction. And another thing, so again, I wouldn't be able to really do much in nursing because while there is patient interaction, I really kind of wanted to be one-on-one with the patient, trying to kind of help them navigate, like discuss and plan and help diagnose and navigate them through their health, journey. So that's really unique to medicine, to a physician. You're kind of the patient's partner in that. So I kind of like looked into all these others as well, like nursing and pharmacy and dental, right? But none give you that unique privilege of really working one-on-one with the patient. It's really only medicine, I feel.
Okay, a question from Nacho. Because you're non-traditional, have you felt like you're held to a different standard, whether it be by your peers, school, or even yourself?
I think that's a good question. I think my peers don't. My peers generally don't. I think I myself hold myself to a different standard. I think I hold myself to a higher standard because of the life experiences that I've had, and like let's say with some of my younger classmates, when they have difficulty kind of perceiving or understanding the social determinants of health and how that kind of compounds and how that causes so much illness in a certain population, like the low income population and things like that. I expect myself to understand that more because I've actually, being non-traditional, I've been around a little bit more. I've seen this more. I've been in that particular bracket. So I hold myself to a higher standard in understanding those kinds of problems and being able to advocate for them. But I don't really necessarily do that with other individuals sometimes, with the younger individuals and things like that. I'm hoping in being able to advocate and try to, convey why these are problems in a way that my younger colleagues can like understand. That's what I'm hoping is a way that I can kind of like bring them in and advocate and kind of understand a little bit more. So I don't hold them, but I do hold myself. And that's kind of how it happens, if that makes any sense.
That's a great response. So we have no more questions from our audience as well. Once again, thank you, Samantha, for being such a wonderful guest speaker and
No
answering
problem.
our questions so patiently. Before we
No
end,
problem.
here's a brief quiz for our audience, and the link will be sent out in the chat shortly. You can also scan the QR code shown on the screen for your convenience. We'll be here for 10 minutes for you to complete the quiz or ask any remaining questions you might have. Feel free to complete the quiz after the event, but do note that you have only 3 days to access the quiz and only one chance. Your responses will be graded, and you should receive a confirmation along with your score by the end of today. Thank you for your participation in our second event, and we hope to see you in our future events.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and thank you for our guest speaker.
Thank you so much for inviting me, ladies.